I've been fishing these waters for 40 years, and I thought I'd seen everything the Pacific could throw at me. Storms that could flip a trawler like a coin, rogue waves that came out of nowhere. Hell, I even pulled up a World War II mine once, still live, the Coast Guard said. But nothing prepared me for what happened that October night. The weather was perfect, too perfect maybe. Dead calm, stars so bright they looked fake, and the kind of silence that makes you check if your engine's still running. I'd dropped anchor about 20 miles out, right over a ledge where the continental shelf drops into nothing. The fish bite good there because they're feeding on whatever floats up from the deep. I was using my heaviest tackle, 300-pound test line on a reel that could pull in a small shark. The bait was fresh mackerel, and I'd dropped it down maybe 800 feet. That's when I felt the first tug. At first, it felt normal, a good strong pull, the kind that gets your blood pumping. I started reeling, thinking I'd hooked into a big halibut or maybe a lingcod. But then the resistance kicked in. This thing wasn't just heavy, it was impossibly heavy, like I'd hooked the ocean floor itself. I've caught 200-pound fish before. This felt like trying to lift a car. I fought it for an hour. My arms burned, my back ached, and sweat was pouring down my face despite the cool night air. The line stayed taut, stretching but never breaking, and whatever was down there wasn't giving up an inch. In fact, it seemed to be getting stronger. That's when I noticed something wrong. My boat was sitting lower in the water. I stopped reeling and checked the bilge. Dry as a bone. No leak, no flooding. But my little fishing boat was definitely riding lower. The waterline that should have been 3 inches above the surface was now barely visible. And still, that line pulled straight down into the black water like a plumb line to hell. Another hour passed, then another. The stars wheeled overhead, and I was starting to get that sick feeling in my stomach, the one you get when you realize you're in real trouble. My boat was sinking, but there was no water coming in. It was being pulled down. I tried to cut the line, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the knife. And something told me that cutting the line wouldn't help anyway. Whatever was down there had me hooked, not the other way around. By 4 a.m., water was lapping at my boots. The Pacific had turned from black to gray, and I could see the faint line of dawn on the horizon. But I wasn't going to see another sunset. The thing on the other end of my line was patient, methodical. It wasn't fighting me anymore. It was just steadily, inevitably pulling me down. That's when the radio crackled to life. Coast Guard Station Astoria to vessel in distress. We're receiving your emergency beacon. What's your situation? I hadn't turned on any emergency beacon.
Hell, I didn't even have one. Couldn't afford the fancy electronics. But I grabbed the mic anyway. "This is the fishing vessel Lucky Strike," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'm being pulled under by something I hooked. I'm taking on water without any breaches in the hull." Silence on the other end. Then, "Say again, Lucky Strike. Did you say pulled under?" "That's affirmative. Whatever I caught, it caught me first. It's been pulling my boat down for hours. Water's at deck level now." More silence. Then a different voice, older, more authoritative. "Lucky Strike, this is Captain Morrison with the Coast Guard. Can you cut your line?" Morrison. Same name as me. Small world, or maybe the universe has a sick sense of humor. "Negative," I replied. "Line's under too much tension, and I don't think it would matter anyway." The water was at my knees now. My boat, my livelihood for 40 years, was going down, and there wasn't a damn thing anyone could do about it. "Lucky strike. We have a helicopter en route. ETA 15 minutes. Can you deploy life rafts?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Captain, there's something you need to understand. I didn't fish this thing up. It fished me, and it's not done with me yet." As if to prove my point, the line suddenly went slack. For a moment, I thought maybe I was free. Maybe whatever nightmare was down there had lost interest. But then I looked at my depth finder. Something massive was rising from the deep. The sonar painted a shape so large it couldn't be real. But the signature was solid, dense, and it was coming up fast. "Coast Guard, you need to stay away," I said into the radio. "Whatever this is, it's not just after me anymore." The water was at my waist. In another minute, it would be over my head. But I couldn't take my eyes off that depth finder. The thing was maybe 200 feet down now, and still rising. That's when I understood. The emergency beacon. The one I didn't have. The one that had somehow started broadcasting. It wasn't mine. It was bait. Just like my mackerel had been bait. Just like I'd been bait. And now the Coast Guard helicopter was coming, drawn by the signal, and whatever was rising from the depths was getting ready for its next catch. I let go of the radio and grabbed my flare gun. If I was going down, I was going down fighting. But as the black water closed over my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere far below, in trenches where the pressure would crush a man like a tin can, something ancient and patient was smiling. The last thing I heard before the water filled my ears was the sound of rotor blades getting closer.
We got the Mayday at 03:47 hours on a Tuesday that started normal and went sideways fast. I'm Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes, 15 years with the Coast Guard, and I've responded to more distress calls than I can count. Sinking boats, engine failures, medical emergencies, you name it. I've pulled people out of situations that should have killed them. But this call was different from the start. The transmission came through crystal clear, which was weird because the coordinates put the vessel in the middle of a storm system that had been hammering the coast for 3 days. Clear transmissions don't usually come out of Force 9 gales. Mayday, Mayday, this is fishing vessel Deep Current. We are taking on water rapidly, 3 souls on board. Position is 47 degrees 12 minutes north, 125 degrees 30 west. Require immediate assistance. Standard distress call, professional delivery, but something in the voice bothered me. Too calm, maybe. When your boat's going down in a storm, you don't sound like you're ordering coffee. We launched within 20 minutes. Me, Petty Officer Martinez on comms, and Seaman Rodriguez handling rescue operations. The weather was brutal, 40-foot swells and winds gusting to 70 knots, but our MH-65 Dolphin helicopter could handle it. The flight took 40 minutes through the worst conditions I'd flown in years. Rodriguez was green around the gills, and even Martinez looked nervous. But we'd all trained for this, and when people are dying, you don't let weather stop you. When we reached the coordinates, the first thing we noticed was how calm it was. Not just calm, dead calm. The storm was raging all around us, but we'd flown into a pocket of perfect stillness, maybe a half-mile across. The water was black as oil and smooth as glass. and sitting right in the center was the deep current. She was a 40-foot fishing boat, maybe 20 years old, showing some wear, but nothing that suggested she was in distress. No list, no obvious damage, lights on in the wheelhouse. She looked like she was anchored for a peaceful night of fishing. Deep current, this is Coast Guard Rescue Helicopter 6025. We are on scene and ready to assist. What's your situation? Silence. We circled the boat twice. No one on deck, no movement in the wheelhouse, no response to our calls. But the boat itself looked fine. More than fine. It looked like someone had just stepped away for a minute. Could be unconscious, Rodriguez suggested. Carbon monoxide, maybe. It was possible. Faulty exhaust systems kill more boaters than storms do. I made the call to fast rope down and check the vessel. The moment my boots hit the deck, I knew something was wrong. The boat was too clean, too perfect. No blood, no signs of struggle, no indication of any emergency. The fishing gear was neatly stowed, the deck was scrubbed clean, and when I looked through the wheelhouse windows, I saw 3 cups of coffee on the table, still steaming.
Still steaming. I keyed my radio. Martinez, how long since that distress call came in? About 90 minutes, sir. 90 minutes. In this weather, coffee would be cold in 10. I drew my sidearm, standard procedure when boarding abandoned vessels, and stepped into the wheelhouse. The radio was on, tuned to channel 16. The logbook was open to today's date, with the last entry timestamped at 0230 hours. All quiet, fish biting good, coffee's fresh, life is good. 15 minutes before the Mayday call. I checked the galley, the sleeping quarters, the engine room. Everything was normal, lived in, like the crew had just vanished mid-sentence. The engine was running smooth, fuel tanks were 3/4 full, and the bilge was bone dry. Sir, Rodriguez called from above. You need to see this. I climbed back on deck. Rodriguez was pointing at the water about 50 feet off our starboard side. At first, I didn't see anything, but then the pattern became clear. The water was moving in a perfect spiral, a slow whirlpool maybe 30 feet across, and it was getting bigger. That's not normal, Martinez said through the headset. Water doesn't move like that in dead calm. He was right. Ocean currents don't just spontaneously form whirlpools, especially not in deep water. But there it was, growing larger by the minute, and the deep current was drifting toward it. That's when the radio crackled to life. Mayday! Mayday! This is fishing vessel Deep Current. We are taking on water rapidly. 3 souls on board. Position is 47 degrees 12 north, 125 degrees 30 west. Require immediate assistance. The exact same message. Word for word, inflection for inflection. But this time, it was coming from beneath us. I ran to the depth finder. The screen showed bottom at 2,800 feet, but there was something else. A massive signature, maybe 100 feet long, sitting on the ocean floor directly below us. And it was moving. Martinez, get us out of here, now. Sir? That's an order. Get the helicopter clear of this area. The radio crackled again. Mayday, Mayday, this is Coast Guard Rescue Helicopter 6025. We are in distress. 4 souls on board. Position is 47 degrees 12 north, 125 degrees west. Require immediate assistance. My blood turned to ice water. That was my voice, my exact words from the flight out. But I hadn't said those words. Rodriguez was staring at me, his face white as paper. Sir, how is it broadcasting your voice? The whirlpool was directly beneath us now, and the deep current was tilting toward it. But it wasn't sinking, it was being pulled.
And as I watched, something rose from the depths of that spiral. It was organic, but wrong. Like a massive jellyfish, but with structure, intelligence. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along what might have been tentacles, and in the center was something that looked disturbingly like a mouth. A mouth full of structures that could have been teeth, or acoustic organs, or both.
"It's mimicking us," I said, finally understanding. "Like those deep-sea fish that use lures to attract prey. But this thing has evolved to mimic radio transmissions." The creature was fully surface now, maybe 200 feet across, and the deep current was sliding down its side like a toy boat on a playground slide. But the 3 coffee cups in the wheelhouse never spilled. The creature was being careful not to damage its bait. "Sir, we need to go," Martinez said. "Whatever that thing is, it's jamming our communications. I can't reach base." That's when I heard it. Our own radio, broadcasting another distress call. But this time, it was the voice of someone from a different Coast Guard station. Someone reporting a helicopter in distress at our exact coordinates. The creature wasn't just mimicking individual voices, it was learning, adapting, creating an entire network of false distress calls. How many boats had it lured out here? How many rescue crews? How many of those coffee cups had been real? We made it back to base, but barely. The thing let us go, probably because we'd served our purpose. We'd responded to its call, confirming that the bait worked. And now it had our voices, our protocols, our exact radio procedures. The official report called it equipment malfunction, atmospheric interference caused by the storm. But I know what I saw, and I know that thing is still out there, patient as the ocean itself, broadcasting perfect replicas of distress calls. And every time a rescue team responds, it learns a little more about how to call for help. Dr. Sarah Chen had warned us about ghost nets before we shipped out, but seeing one in person is something else entirely. I'm Marcus Webb, marine biologist with Ocean Cleanup Initiative, and I've spent 5 years pulling trash out of the Pacific. Plastic bottles, abandoned equipment, cargo containers, the ocean's full of humanity's discarded mistakes. But ghost nets are the worst. These are commercial fishing nets that broke free or were abandoned, and they keep fishing forever. They drift through the ocean like underwater tornadoes, catching everything that swims into them. Fish, dolphins, whales, sea turtles, anything that gets tangled dies there, slowly. And their rotting bodies attract more animals, which get caught, which attract more animals. It's a death spiral that can go on for decades. We'd been tracking this particular net for 6 months via satellite imagery. It was massive, maybe 400 feet long and shaped like a loose funnel, the kind of industrial fishing gear that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. No crew abandons something that valuable unless something went seriously wrong. Our ship, the Pacific Guardian, found it at dawn on a Tuesday. Captain Morrison, same name as the fisherman who'd gone missing 3 weeks earlier, small world, positioned us upwind while our dive team suited up. The plan was simple. Send down 2 divers to assess the net's condition, then use the ship's crane to haul it up in sections. We'd done this dozens of times before. Should have been routine. But the moment we got our first underwater camera feed, we knew this was different. The net wasn't just drifting, it was anchored.
Something massive was holding it in place about 200 feet down, keeping it suspended in the water column like a web. And it was full. Completely, impossibly full. "Jesus Christ," whispered Tommy Santos, our dive coordinator. "How many fish are in that thing?" The underwater camera showed thousands of shapes tangled in the mesh, dark silhouettes that moved with the current, all sizes, all species. It looked like every fish in the Pacific had swum into this net and gotten trapped. But they weren't struggling. That was the first thing that bothered me. Trapped fight. They exhaust themselves trying to escape, then die. These fish were just hanging there, moving slightly with the current, but calm, patient. "Take us down for a closer look," I told our dive team, "but stay outside the net. Don't get anywhere near that mesh." Pete Rodriguez and Amy Sullivan went down first. They were both experienced technical divers, certified to 300 feet, and they'd pulled apart more ghost nets than anyone on our team. Their voice came through clear on the comms. "We're at 150 feet, visual on the net. Marcus, this thing is... God, it's huge. And it's not torn or damaged. It's like it was placed here." "Placed?" Captain Morrison asked. "Nets don't place themselves." "I know what I'm seeing, Captain."
This net is too perfect, too symmetrical. And the fish... Pete's voice trailed off. "What about the fish?" "They're not fish." The underwater camera feed was grainy at that depth, but I could see Pete and Amy approaching the edge of the net. The shapes inside were clearer now, and Pete was right. They had the general silhouette of fish, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too angular. And they all had the same basic body plan, like they were manufactured rather than evolved. "They're moving," Amy reported. "All of them in unison, like a school, but coordinated." That's when the sonar operator spoke up. "Contact rising from the deep. Big contact. Estimate 300 feet in length." I looked at the sonar display. Something massive was descending from the abyssal depths, moving fast. The signature was dense, organic, and it was heading straight for the net. "All divers, surface immediately. Emergency ascent now." But Pete and Amy didn't respond. On the camera feed, I could see them floating motionless near the net, their bubbles rising in a steady stream, but they weren't moving. "Pete? Amy, do you copy?" Nothing. The sonar contact was at 500 feet now, still rising. And on the camera feed, all those fish-like shapes in the net had turned to face our divers. That's when I realized they weren't trapped at all. They were waiting. "Captain, we need to cut the dive lines and get out of here," I said. "Like hell? I'm not leaving my people." "Those aren't your people anymore." On the monitor, Pete and Amy were swimming directly into the net, moving with the same coordinated precision as the things already trapped inside. Their dive lights illuminated hundreds of bodies tangled in the mesh, and for the first time, I could see them clearly. They were human, or had been human once. Divers, fishermen, Coast Guard personnel, all still in their gear, all perfectly preserved by the deep cold water, all staring at Pete and Amy with black, intelligent eyes. The sonar contact was at 200 feet. Whatever was rising from the depths was almost to the net. "Full power, get us out of here," I shouted at Captain Morrison, but it was too late. The thing that surfaced wasn't like anything in any marine biology textbook. It was a colony organism, maybe 400 feet long, and shaped like a massive brain coral, but mobile, intelligent. The net wasn't a trap, it was a lure. A collection system operated by something that had learned to mimic human distress signals, human behavior,
human appearance. The ghost net wasn't abandoned equipment. It was a web, and the spider had just come home. Pete and Amy never came back up. Neither did the dozen other dive teams that had investigated ghost nets in this area over the past year. The official reports blamed equipment failure, nitrogen narcosis, simple accidents. But I know better. Somewhere out there in the deep Pacific, there's a colony of things that look human, that remember being human, but serve something else entirely. They maintain their nets, broadcast their signals, and wait for the curious to come investigate. And when marine biologists like me show up to clean the ocean, they discover that sometimes the ocean cleans us right back. The net is still out there, still fishing, still growing. And the Pacific is a big, hungry place.